Jeremy Sims, and I am running for Texas House District 91. Thank you all for inviting me and welcoming me. I feel so at home here because I am just a regular guy. I'm a regular guy who's running for office because I saw too many politicians that were not representing the people that they were supposed to be representing in office. They were representing the people who were writing big checks and granting power and contracts to back doors to the politicians. And I don't think that's right. I grew up where my dad he started out as an auto body mechanic and moved on to, decided to be a preacher, and so I grew up for the largest part of my growing up time as a preacher's kid. And I just want to say that Mr. Garcia mentioned some of the things that are going on in our society today, and one of the things that really inspired me and drove me to make that leap into running for office was I learned growing up that my Jesus that I learned about cared about people who didn't have anything and cared about your neighbor, whether that neighbor was across a border or next door or anywhere else. Our neighbor is anybody else on this earth. That's what I was taught growing up, is to love one another and to look out for people who had less than you. I was taught to have a servant's heart and carry that out through the rest of my life. And as I stood with maybe some of you, but many people who went down to the Fort Worth City Council meeting and tried to get them to join the SB4 lawsuit, when I saw that many people with that much passion standing up against a system that was designed to attack our neighbor, I decided that I needed to stand up too.
That's right.
There is nobody else that is standing up in our area. I live in Haltom City, Watauga, North Richland Hills, and Richland Hills. And one of the things that I'm doing is, yes, I'm running for office, but I'm also trying to build a community of voters, much like LULAC does with organizing and things like that. If we are not organized and we don't know each other and have a relationship, there is no way we're going to be successful long term in affecting change in our politics. So thank you. I'm running for office, but I'm also building a community of voters. And that's why I'm here today, to reach out and say, thank you for having me here. How can we work together? So with that, if anybody has questions, I would love to hear from you. I'm calculating I need between 26 and 27,000 votes. Yeah, and we did have double the turnout this time in our primary than we did in actually the presidential primary. And those are encouraging numbers, but we still need about 15,000 more votes to come up with to win. Yes, ma'am.
I imagine you need people on the phone for walking. How do we get a hold of you?
Great, thank you. We are a grassroots campaign. I'm not taking big checks from people in West Texas like Empower Texans. If you haven't heard of that, please go look it up. You'll see on the table where you came in, there's some of my push cards. It has a phone number and an email address on the back. He's holding my back there. Please pick one of those up. That phone number rings on my cell phone, and that email comes to the email on my phone and on my computer, because I'm just a regular guy running for office. Also, there is a clipboard back there where I do need volunteers to block walk, call, help me translate my material, because I did take Spanish in high school, but don't ask me to speak it very well, and I'm not going to use Google Translate. There's all kinds of things that we can do. So please put your name and phone number down and we'll get in touch with you to volunteer on the campaign. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is a candidate for State Representative District 26. She is a single mom, daughter of a union worker, an entrepreneur, and an activist who still lives 3 doors down from her parents and a few blocks from her sister. She is the daughter of the Democratic Party. In her first year of motherhood, Lindsay received help from programs such as WIC, Medicaid, and Pell Grants. She's a success story who fought and moved forward, and gave back more than she received in her investment. She has never been in politics before. This is her first race for office. Okay? And she is the Democratic, the candidate for State Representative District 26, Lindsay Fagan.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Fagan. I'm running for U.S. House District 26, so I have all of Denton County except a small gerrymandered corner of Carrollton, and then I come all the way down into North Fort Worth, parts of Halton City, North Ocean Hills. Before I ran for office, I was a hospice volunteer, indoor soccer player. I actually had a lot of fun hobbies, but now my hobbies are hanging out with Jeremy, knocking on doors, trying to make the changes that I want to see. I decided to run after explaining my daughter on the way to school one day how to hide from a school shooter, and I finally got to the point. It was a breaking point for me. I finally got to the point where I felt like if nobody else is gonna run against these people, I will. Just like Jeremy, my race is a hard one to win, but just like my primary was. And I think if you put in the work, you work hard, and you love people, that there's definitely a chance for us to win in 2018, 2020. And I'm dedicated to the people in North Texas. I was born and raised here. My dad works 6 or 7 days a week. He has his entire life, and there's nobody fighting for people like that. My big priorities are getting dark money out of politics. We're 100% people funded. We don't take any PAC money. Our average donation size is $12.24. And yeah, we're funded 100% by the regular American people. We work hard, we love people, and we're succeeding doing that. And I would love your support. Me and Jeremy, we're starting our block walks this Sunday. We'll be block walking every weekend from here till November. We had a postcard party last night. We wrote 1,000 postcards, and yeah, we're doing everything we can to protect you guys, to protect all North Texans and the Americans at large. And I would love your support, and thank you guys so much for coming out this morning.
Any questions for Ms. Fagan? This is a shy group. Normally there's a lot of questions.
Oh, here. Not to mention your opponent or anything, but what things is he for that you're totally against so that we can get our people mobilized?
Yeah, so recently he sponsored a bill that fines companies in the Northern Triangle for every child refugee that comes to America. And at a town hall he was at recently, he was asked, what are you going to do about these kids?
What's his name again?
Michael Burgess.
Okay.
So recently he was asked, what are you going to do about these kids? And he said, basically, it's not my problem. Ask the leaders of El Salvador, Guatemala. And I think that for me, if we had more mothers in Congress, I'm a mother, I have a daughter. If we had more mothers in Congress, I do think that you would see those children's crying, and that would be our #1 priority, 100%. And Texas hasn't sent a new female to Congress in 20 years, and females represent 17% of the House of Representatives right now. And I think that we need more female voices at the table, just as you guys do. And yeah, you could go on and on about the things he's done. He's a doctor, and he's sponsored the AHCA, trying to dismantle Obamacare. Yeah, he's just not a good guy. And there's another thing that I think pisses off people across the board. He got $400,000 from the telecom industry. He turned around and he sponsored the bill that allows ISP companies to buy and sell our private data, so our Google searches, everything. So he's a threat not to just liberals, he's a threat to everyone in this community, our privacy, and I'm doing everything I can to take him out.
I want to correct myself. She's not running for state representative. She's running for Congress. Okay? For the U.S. representative. So I want to make sure that that's clear. The next speaker is talking about a topic that's very in the news today. Many of you have seen all the mass shootings that have been happening in different schools. The last one being in Parkland, Florida. And in fact, some of the kids from Parkland were here in North Texas in the last week or so. And they've been trying to bring the issue of how to stop violence in high schools, in elementary schools like Sandy Hook. And some people are taking action. And our next speaker is a single mom with 3 children. She's an educator and a writer, and has now decided to become an activist. Christy joined Moms Demand Action shortly after the shooting at Majority Stoneman Douglas High School. As a mother of a high school student, she won't accept that children are dying in a place where safety should be the furthest things from the mind. After the shootings at the Santa Fe High School, she took her energy to Austin to testify before the Senate Select Committee for Violence in Schools and School Safety Hearings. So let's give a big hand to Christy Hill with Fort Worth chapter of Mothers Demand Action. Moms Demand Action.
Thank you for having me here this morning to talk to you and share my story. As you heard, I'm a single mom, so my why are my kids that are in public schools. In 1999, I lived in Los Angeles, California. I'm originally from Texas. I moved out there for a little while just to see what it was like. And I was teaching 3rd grade when I came home one afternoon to watch the news and heard that people had gone into a school and killed teachers and students at Columbine High School. And at that time, it was very shocking. This was not something we heard about, shootings in schools. It was scary, but you have to carry on, right? So I'm still in a classroom, still teaching, still doing my job. 10 years later, 10 years after the shooting at Columbine, I'm back in Texas and teaching in Texas public schools. And I have a 5-year-old going into kindergarten. And at our big convocation that year, the school district brought in a motivational speaker. It happened to be Daryl Scott, who was the father of Rachel Scott, who was killed at Columbine. And I don't know about you, but for me, it was not motivational to listen to a father whose daughter was murdered at a place that she should have been safe, and then expect me to send my child to public school and go into the classroom. So this is when, for me, it kind of became personal, because now I had a child in school and this was not acceptable. Shortly after that was the shooting at Sandy Hook. Right after, actually the day after Sandy Hook, Shannon Watts, a mother, took to Facebook and started this Facebook page to bring people together to say it's not okay that our kids are being murdered in school. And her name was Shannon Watts, and she founded Moms Demand Action as a grassroots organization on social media, and we now have over 4 million supporters across the nation. In 2012, when Sandy Hook happened, my response, because I was still politically complacent at the time, politics was not for me, activism was not for me, my response was to shut off the news. I'm just not going to listen to it, I'm not going to look at the images, I'm going to ignore that it's happening. And then we had another shooting, and another shooting, and another shooting, and in 2017, there were 65 shootings that happened in schools. After the shooting at Parkland, I realized that being politically complacent was no longer an option. I can't sit around and let this continue to happen. I can't complain about it if I'm not willing to do something about it. And so at that point, I joined Moms Demand Action. I hadn't heard of Moms Demand Action until the shooting at Parkland. And I started the chapter here in Fort Worth. Then almost immediately after that, in May of this year, this epidemic of school shootings found its way to Texas in Santa Fe High School, where 10 people were killed. So Moms Demand Action has several major platforms. joining Moms Demand Action for me was as much of an educational form of activism as it was of actually, getting involved in the legislation, because I didn't know that you could buy a gun on the internet or at a gun show without getting a background check done. I didn't know that 96 people die every day from gun violence, 7 of them children and teenagers. I didn't know that the presence of a gun doubled the risk of homicide and tripled the risk of suicide by gun violence, just having a gun around and having access to a weapon. So I learned a lot getting involved with Moms Demand Action. And then I took my voice to Austin, and that's where I really felt legit. Testifying in front of those people who are supposed to be there making laws to protect us, but telling me that they wanted to arm teachers was not okay with me. And so it was very empowering to stand up in that hearing room and let them know that I'm not okay with a gun in my child's classroom. I do not want to be responsible for having a gun and being in charge of protecting my school. When we went back to school last year, our professional development at the beginning of the year involved active shooter training. It does probably in most of our schools. The difference was, in this training, than any other training I'd ever done, was that I was being told that no longer is it solely my job to hide the children. It's now my job to fight back so that I can earn precious seconds for police officers to get there. Teachers are being told that police officers aren't the first responders anymore. We are. And so we have to do something. We can't be quiet any longer. And I highly encourage you, if you have not checked out Moms Demand Action, if you go to our website, see what we're about. We're fighting to close the loopholes in the background checks. We believe there should be background checks on every gun sale. We are trying really hard to pass red flag laws that gives family members and law enforcement the ability to temporarily remove guns from a dangerous situation if someone is showing signs that they could be a harm to themselves or others. We're fighting to educate people on the safe storage of weapons, especially in homes that have children in them. And you can get involved as easily as texting the word READY to 64433. That will get you hooked up to all of the events, not only that are happening here in Fort Worth, but across the state. And we would love to have you join us at our meeting. We have a meeting coming up on the 18th at the brand new Fort Worth Police Station on North Riverside in North Fort Worth. We're going to be talking about the Be Smart program, which kind of empowers people to have conversations about gun safety and how to talk to your friends, your children's friends, to make sure that homes they're visiting have their weapons safely stored so that you know your child is safe when they're visiting their friends. I have a few things. I'll get them to the back table, I guess, before you leave, that you can pick up information on our local groups and what Moms Demand Action is all about. Thanks for having me.
Are there any questions?
I have a question. This paranoia with the school shooting, one of the unintended consequences are security checks on the parents. And here in Fort Worth, we have a situation where Latinos are paying for the school shootings by being excluded from schools, be in schools with the kids, because they don't have an ID. They do security checks, and they don't have an ID, they can participate in the schools. They can't volunteer. So the Latinos are paying for the school shooting by being excluded from school.
I don't know the answer to that problem. I work in a school that does require any visitor on campus to, obviously we don't do background checks, but they do run the ID just to make sure there aren't any flags on there. I don't know the solution to that.
I'm sorry, I'm an educator of 22 years, but I think what he's referring to is the fact that when Latino parents come back to the office, as is required by law,
Yes.
a lot of the times, 99% of the time, they're being excluded by being asked to show documentation that they don't carry. Even though the law says that any state, any government ID should suffice, they carry documentation. But the way they're being excluded, actually discriminated against, is by not accepting that at face value. And you and I know that Nicole said that this is very important. It's the law. We need to involve parents in the process. Kids will not do as good academically or anywhere else if they don't have the parents involved in the school system. You
Right,
know that.
absolutely.
So that's what
Okay,
he's referring to.
so then what I would suggest, I had never attended a school board meeting as a parent before. I've been at many school board meetings as an educator. Go to those school board meetings. You can sign up the day of, I think for Fort Worth ISD, if you're in Fort Worth ISD, you can even apply online to speak at the board meetings and make your voice heard. This is one thing I've learned out of this whole process is that if you don't speak up, there will never be a change.
There's a question over in the back.
Yes.
I just have a statement. My name is Lori Rodriguez, and I'm involved in various groups and position on different boards. However, at Fort Worth ISD, they did culture at the last board meeting. Security culture. What they'll do is use passports to the secondary ID to allow entry for visitors. Anybody else that would like to work in other areas at the school would have to require to do background check, and that would require state ID. So the immigration that would need to be changed to be able to have a background check. However, we can use your INF for Latino and then secondary ID to be able to go to visitors. It is adopted this at the secondary, 2 board meetings ago. Also, each school is under very different things that each campus as far as security. That way each badge can open the outside doors and you have to go through all this. There won't be like coming to the side door at any time.
Yeah, I think a lot of school buildings are doing that.
I'm gonna ask the obvious, how do you stand on teachers caring?
So this is actually what took me to Austin. It's real hard when your boss, or really your boss's boss's boss, the Texas Education Agency, comes out and says, we think this is a viable option, arming teachers. I'm absolutely against it. We know, we have empirical data that proves that the presence of a gun doubles the risk of death by gun homicide, triples the risk of death by suicide. I also know that I don't want the responsibility of shooting a child that comes into my school, even if I believe they're a danger. If you think high school students won't know where you're hiding your gun, you've got another thing coming. Those kids know everything. So there's no way to really safely store a weapon in a classroom. So yes, I'm very much against it. All right, thank you.
All right, our next speaker is here from, is a 21-year veteran of the Fort Worth Police Department. He was raised right here in Fort Worth, grew up in Diamond Hill and the North Side. During his early school years, he transferred from Dunbar Middle School and went to graduate from Dunbar High School. He joined the Army Reserves during his junior year in high school and served in the Army Reserves for 8 years. He went on to graduate from Texas Wesleyan University with a bachelor's in criminal justice. In 1997, he joined the Fort Worth Police Department, and upon graduation, he was assigned to the East Division, where he patrolled Stop 6 and Polytechnic neighborhoods. He later transferred to the narcotics unit, where he spent 10 years. He worked with the DEA and was part of one of the 6 largest seizures in U.S. history when they took down a drug dealer with 650 pounds of cocaine, 600 pounds of methamphetamine, and $2 million in cash. He has now been promoted and is a detective for the Fort Worth Homicide Unit. Let's give a big hand to one of the men in blue who serves this city, Detective Jerry Cedillo.
Good morning. I am not running for office, but I am taking donations. So if anybody has donations, we'll take them. Give them to Nestor. No, seriously, good morning. Thank you for having me here for this wonderful cause that you guys get together for every once in a while here in Fort Worth. It's a great thing. It's the first time I've been here, but I hope to be back. A little bit more about me. I was born in Abilene, and we moved to Fort Worth when I was about 2 years old. And like Domingo said, we lived on Weber Street in Diamond Hill. I attended M.H. Moore Elementary. I went to Meacham Middle School my 6th grade year, and then I was accepted into the magnet program at Dunbar Middle, where I attended my 7th and 8th grade year, and then I went on to graduate from Dunbar High School. Following high school, I attended Texas Wesleyan, where I graduated with a bachelor's in science and criminal justice. I also was in the military, where I served for 8 years in the reserves. Ever since I was a kid, I always knew I wanted to be a police officer. That was just my thing. At one point, I thought I wanted to work for the FBI, and I actually applied, but there were certain things going on with my life at that time that I declined the offer of employment with the FBI and decided to stay with the Fort Worth Police Department. During my time with Fort Worth PD, I was assigned to the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. I was part of a very unique unit called HIDTA, and it's HIDTA. It's a task force where we not only investigate crimes in Fort Worth, we investigate crimes all over North Texas, and I had the honor and pleasure of traveling throughout the country and investigating other drug organizations throughout the country. Like it was mentioned earlier, I was part of a seizure where we seized 650 pounds of cocaine, 600 pounds of methamphetamine, and $2 million in cash in one seizure, one takedown the same day, same guys. That organization was tied to the Zetas. At that time, there was a guy named Miguel Trevino who was the head of the Zetas, and he was in charge of that drugs that we ended up seizing in Dallas. So that is the 6th biggest seizure in U.S. history to this day, domestically, not counting the Coast Guards and the border seizures. So I was very honored to be part of that. I spent 10 years in narcotics. Following my narcotics assignment, I went to the homicide unit. Actually, I promoted to detective. I spent 1 year in the robbery unit. During my time in robbery, I worked on the Ruben Martinez case. Are you guys familiar with Ruben Martinez? The Budweiser delivery individual that was shot and killed at Azel and Long. That happened back in, I believe it was 2010. Ruben Martinez was delivering beer at a